The day has finally quieted. Even if your mind hasn't fully caught up yet, you're here now, settling into a space that doesn't ask anything from you, a place where you can simply lie back, breathe a little softer, and let the edges of the day loosen. Imagine yourself on a quiet porch as evening drifts in. The air is mild, almost cool, with the kind of stillness that settles over a small lakeside town after dinner dishes have been put away. There's a wooden chair beneath you, smooth from years of use, and the faint creak of it feels friendly, familiar. Off in the distance, crickets begin their slow chorus. Steady and unhurried, a few porch lights glow across the water, soft and amber, like gentle reminders that other hearts are unwinding too. Let your breath match that peaceful rhythm. A long, easy inhale, a softer, slower exhale. Nothing forced, nothing to manage. You might feel a bit of today still clinging, little tight spots in the shoulders, a heaviness behind the eyes, the kind of mental fizz that comes after too many decisions and too many thoughts. It's all right. That's how long days work. They leave echoes. But here, on this quiet porch, with the lake stretching out like a wide, dark blanket, those echoes begin to fade. Notice how your body slowly remembers its own weight, your hands resting, your jaw unclenching, your chest rising without strain. Even the air feels different, cooler, slower, like it's giving you permission to stop trying so hard. In this calm, you may recall small things from the day, a conversation that stuck with you, a choice you weren't sure about, something you tried to finish but couldn't. But out here, they lose their sharpness. They drift the way a leaf moves across the lake, guided by something quieter than your thoughts. Another easy breath. Let it fall out of you like warm air leaving an open doorway. Feel the porch beneath you, the stillness of the water, the dusk settling deeper into the trees. The world is dimming gently, and you're allowed to dim with it. You've carried work, you've carried family needs, you've carried bills and expectations, and the subtle weight of being the one who keeps everything moving. Even if no one sees how much you do, you feel it in your shoulders, your chest, your busy mind. Here, though, you can set that down for a while, not by pushing anything away, but simply by letting the night hold some of the load for you. The porch boards cool under your feet. The lake quiets. The air slows to a hush, and your breath follows. This is the space where stillness begins, not dramatic, not sudden, just a soft settling, like dust floating down after a long day of light. A stillness you don't have to earn. It arrives on its own when you stop trying to shape the moment. Stay with this breath. Stay with this porch. Let the quiet spread through you, the way evening spreads across a calm lake wide. Steady, unbroken. And before we drift into the stories, if these videos help you rest a little easier, you're welcome to subscribe so you can find them again whenever you need them. And if you feel comfortable, you can leave a simple comment. 1, if this helped you unwind. 2, if it didn't. It truly helps me understand what brings you ease. Now, let the porch fade into darkness. Let the lake settle into silence. And follow me into the first story. Story 01, The Angry Brahmin. In the late afternoon light, the Buddha walked quietly through a dusty village road. The air was warm, and small birds shifted in the branches overhead. A Brahmin hurried toward him, face tight with anger. This man had been holding on to resentment for days. replaying old arguments like a loop he couldn't shut off. The moment he saw the Buddha, all that pent-up frustration burst out: sharp words, accusations, blame. The Buddha simply stood there, calm as a still pond. He didn't react. He didn't push back. His steady presence made the Brahmin pause, breath catching as the heat drained from his chest. He realized he was offering the Buddha his anger, the way someone offers an unwanted gift. And the Buddha, by not accepting it, left the man holding only his own turmoil. The insight landed softly. You might know that feeling, carrying irritation from work or from someone's tone, replaying what you wish you had said, and maybe you've felt how a calm presence can cool everything inside you. Anger only grows when we pick it up. Letting it pass through keeps the heart lighter. Tonight, place a hand on your chest and breathe slowly. With each exhale, imagine setting down just one small irritation from your day. Story 02. The woman grieving her son. Kisah Gotami. One quiet evening near Jetavana, a young mother arrived, dusty and trembling, clutching the still body of her child. Her grief was raw, the kind that steals sleep and squeezes the world into a narrow tunnel. She begged the Buddha for a way to bring her son back. Her mind was tight with desperation, the same way grown adults today feel when life hits in a place they cannot control: bills, illness, phone calls at the wrong hour. The Buddha gently told her to bring him a mustard seed from a household that had never lost someone. She went door to door, hope flickering, but every home had its own story of loss. By dusk she returned, hollow but clearer. She realized she wasn't alone. Pain wasn't a punishment, it was part of being human. Her breath steadied, her shoulders softened. You might recognize that feeling the moment you understand that your struggle isn't a failure, just a human moment shared by many. No one carries sorrow alone. Letting yourself be human is a kind of relief. Tonight, place one hand on your belly and breathe deeply. Whisper silently, "I am allowed to feel this." And, quote, Story 03. The monk who needed to let go. 2 arrows. One morning in the bamboo grove, a young monk approached the Buddha with frustration tightened across his brow. He felt overwhelmed by his own thoughts, judging himself for every mistake. The Buddha explained without fancy words that being hurt once is like the first arrow, but shooting yourself with self-blame is the second arrow, the one we inflict on ourselves. The monk felt something unclench inside. He realized he'd been stabbing himself with worry and perfectionism long after the moment had passed. Maybe you've done the same after a long workday, replaying what you should have done better, piling pressure on top of exhaustion. Pain is part of life. The second arrow is optional. Tonight, gently breathe and say inwardly, "I don't have to add more. Let that be enough for now." Story 04. The farmer complaining about his life. A tired farmer once approached the Buddha, listing every frustration: broken tools, stubborn oxen, family conflict, money, uncertainty. His voice carried the same edge many adults feel after too many responsibilities and not enough rest. The Buddha listened, patient and kind. He didn't promise solutions. He simply reminded the farmer that everyone carries difficulties. No one gets a life without them, not even kings. The farmer's shoulders slowly dropped. The weight didn't vanish, but it loosened when he stopped expecting life to be problem-free. You may know that shift, the relief that comes when you stop fighting the fact that life is imperfect. Life comes with its bundle of troubles, Peace grows when we stop demanding otherwise. Tonight, exhale and allow one problem to be unfinished without fixing it. Just for this hour. Story 05. The monk restless in meditation. In the cool shade near the river, a monk confessed to the Buddha that his mind wouldn't settle. Thoughts raced like fish under the surface, worries, memories, old regrets. He felt defective, convinced he wasn't good enough. The Buddha reminded him that a distracted mind is simply a mind looking for steady ground. Even experienced practitioners feel restlessness. The monk breathed easier, realizing nothing was wrong with him. Maybe you've tried to relax at night and felt your mind dart everywhere. It doesn't mean failure. It means you're tired. A wandering mind isn't broken. It just needs gentleness. Tonight, follow your breath for 10 slow cycles. When the mind drifts, guide it back like you'd guide a child softly. Story 06. The Buddha calms a quarrel. In the city of Kosambi, 2 groups of monks were caught in a bitter argument. Voices rose. Friendships strained. Days soured. The Buddha approached them quietly, his presence like cool water on warm skin. He reminded them that holding tightly to being right only deepens division. Hearing this, several monks softened, others lowered their gaze. The tension slowly untangled. You might know that feeling arguing at home or at work, convinced your view is the only clear one, until exhaustion shows you the cost of holding so tightly. Sometimes being right is less important than being at peace. Softness brings us back to each other. Tonight, breathe into your shoulders and release the urge to win old arguments just for now. Story 07. The Buddha teaches about the raft. One calm morning near the river, the Buddha spoke to a group of monks about holding on to beliefs and opinions long after they've served their purpose. He used the simple image of a raft useful for crossing, not for carrying forever. A monk realized he'd been clinging to outdated ideas. The way some people today cling to old stories about themselves. I'm not capable. I always mess up. I can't change. Infound. Under cancer visited. You might feel that too, carrying labels that no longer fit. Use the raft. Then set it down. Old stories don't need to come with you. Tonight, write one short line, just one, about a story you're ready to put down. Story 08. The Buddha and the grieving woman at the well. Near a small well, a mother collapsed in grief after losing her daughter. Villagers brought her to the Buddha. Her breath was tight, body trembling, mind trapped in memory. The Buddha didn't lecture. He simply stayed with her, steady and patient, until her sobs eased enough for her to look up. In that quiet space, she felt seen, not fixed, just understood. From there, healing slowly began. You may know that kind of grief, the ache that softens only when someone sits with you without trying to change the feeling. Healing begins with being held in understanding. Presence is its own medicine. Tonight, place your hand over your heart and whisper inwardly, I'm here with myself. 18. Story 09. The Buddha and the Worried Merchant. A merchant came to the Buddha with fear tightening his stomach. Business risks, debt, uncertainty about the future. He barely slept. His mind spun with what-ifs. We force. The Buddha spoke gently about how worry grows when the mind leaps into futures that haven't arrived. The merchant returned to his breath, realizing he was living in a storm of imagined outcomes. You may feel that money concerns, unstable plans, deadlines stacking up, The mind runs ahead and leaves the body behind. The future can't be solved in one night, but the next breath can steady you. Tonight, breathe into your belly and anchor attention there for one slow minute. Story 10. The Buddha guides a monk struggling with shame. In the early evening, a monk approached the Buddha with eyes lowered. He had broken a small rule and was drowning in shame. Convinced he was unworthy of practice, the Buddha encouraged him to acknowledge the mistake, learn from it, and move forward without the heavy chain of self-punishment. The monk's breath slowly steadied, relief softening his face. You might recognize that feeling, replaying a mistake, letting it define your whole sense of self. Mistakes are moments, not identities. You get to begin again. Tonight, inhale gently and say inwardly, I'm allowed to start fresh. Let that be your closing thought. Story 11. The Buddha and the monks who feared the forest spirits. One evening at Jetavana, a group of monks approached the Buddha with worry tightening their faces. They had been sent to meditate in a forest where villagers believed spirits caused harm. The monks felt uneasy, their minds restless at night, hearing every rustle as a threat. The Buddha listened with the same calm patience he always held. Instead of telling them to fight their fear, he gave them verses of loving kindness to soften the heart. When they returned to the forest, their gentle goodwill shifted the atmosphere. The unease slowly dissolved. You might know that feeling walking into a situation at work or a tense family space, expecting conflict before it even happens. Fear softens when the heart leans toward kindness. A warm intention can steady your whole body. Tonight, send a simple silent wish toward anyone you'll see tomorrow. May we meet with ease. Let it settle in your breath. Story 12. The Buddha and the young monk, afraid of death. A young monk once sat alone, trembling at the thought of mortality. The more he tried to push the fear away, the stronger it grew. His nights were sleepless, breath tight with dread. The Buddha found him beside a quiet path and spoke about seeing life honestly, how recognizing impermanence can bring clarity instead of panic. The monk felt his chest unclench as he realized he didn't have to run from the truth. He could meet it gently, one breath at a time. Maybe you felt that dread worries about aging, illness, or losing someone you love. The mind tightens around what it cannot control. Facing the truth kindly brings more peace than running from it. Soft honesty opens the heart. Tonight, breathe slowly and repeat, right now, I am safe. Right now, I am breathing. Okay. Story 13. The Buddha and the monk who wanted praise. One morning, a monk came to the Buddha disappointed that no one noticed his efforts. He worked hard sweeping paths, helping others, but longed for appreciation. His chest felt hollow, craving recognition. The Buddha gently reminded him that seeking praise ties the heart to other people's moods. The monk felt a warm calm spread inside, realizing he could act from sincerity rather than hunger for approval. You may know that feeling, trying your best at work or home and wondering if anyone sees it. Goodness doesn't need applause. Quiet sincerity is a freedom of its own. Tonight, place a hand on your heart and tell yourself, I see my own effort. Let it be enough. Story 14. The generous king who still felt empty. King Pasenadi. King Pasenadi once visited the Buddha, tired and uneasy even in his wealth. He had eaten heavily, rushed through duties, and felt disconnected from himself. The Buddha spoke about moderation, how living in balance brings a clarity richer than luxury. The king breathed out slowly, touched by the simple reminder. With a steadier mind, he recognized how chasing pleasure never filled the deeper hunger for ease. Maybe you felt that buying things, scrolling, snacking, trying to fill an inner restlessness that never quite settles. Balance brings more peace than indulgence. A steady life eases the heart. Tonight, take 3 slow breaths and ask yourself, what would feel balanced for me tomorrow? Story 15. The Buddha and the monk discouraged by slow progress. A weary monk approached the Buddha, frustrated that his mind still wandered after years of practice. He felt behind, comparing himself to others, convinced he was failing. The Buddha reminded him that progress is like tuning a lute too tight or too loose, and the string won't sing. The monk understood and let go of the pressure to force change. Maybe you felt behind at work, in healing, in life. The mind tightens when we compare our pace to others. Steady effort grows roots slowly. Gentleness keeps you going. Tonight, take a slow breath and silently say, my pace is enough. 9. Story 16. The Buddha helps a monk overcome resentment. In the quiet bamboo grove, a monk confessed he could not forgive someone who had wronged him. The resentment lived like a stone in his chest. The Buddha encouraged him to reflect on how holding bitterness harms the one who carries it most. Hearing this, the monk felt a small, softening resentment didn't vanish, but its grip loosened. You might recognize that tightness reliving someone's hurtful words long after the moment ended. Letting go isn't approval, it's freedom. Forgiveness softens the load. Tonight, inhale deeply and imagine placing one small resentment down beside you, even for a minute. Story 17. The Buddha and the uneasy devotee, worried about karma. A layperson approached the Buddha with a knot of fear in his stomach. He worried that past mistakes doomed him, that karma was a shadow he could never outrun. The Buddha explained that intention and present action shape the path ahead more than old missteps. The man breathed easier, realizing he didn't need to carry fear like a lifelong burden. You might know that worry thinking one wrong choice defines your whole life. The future responds to how you walk now. A kinder step reshapes the path. Tonight, reflect on one small good action you can offer tomorrow. Gentle, simple, real. Story 18. The Buddha and the monk, frustrated with his body. A monk once told the Buddha his body was aging, aching knees, slower steps, stiffness in the back. He felt embarrassed, comparing himself to younger monks who moved with ease. The Buddha reminded him that the body follows its own nature. Accepting its limits brings more peace than fighting them. The monk exhaled, letting a bit of the frustration go. You might know that sense waking sore, feeling slower than you used to, wondering if it means you're losing ground. The body changes, your worth doesn't. Tonight, place a gentle hand on one area that feels tired and offer it one slow breath of kindness. Story 19. The Buddha calms a group of frightened villagers. In a small village, strange noises at night had frightened the locals. They imagined disasters, spirits, danger. Their worries piled up until they felt trapped in their own stories. The Buddha visited, listened, and helped them see how fear grows from assumptions. Once they understood the sounds came from natural causes, the villagers relaxed, laughing at how much their minds had built up. Maybe you've had that experience imagining worst-case scenarios at work or home, only to discover the situation wasn't nearly as heavy. The mind can make shadows look like monsters. Clarity brings things back to size. Tonight, ask yourself, is this fear fact or a story I'm telling? Let the question soften you. Story 20. The Buddha teaches the goldsmith's son about patience. A young man training as a goldsmith came to the Buddha discouraged. He wanted to master his craft quickly, but the slow progress frustrated him. His mind raced, comparing himself to others. The Buddha spoke of how gold becomes pure through patient heating, cooling, and shaping. The young man realized that steady, long effort brings strength more than rushing. Maybe you feel that wanting your career, healing, or relationships to change fast. Patience grows real skill. Slow shaping makes lasting change. Tonight, breathe gently and choose one thing to approach with patience. Tomorrow, no rush, no forcing. Story 21. The Buddha and the Quarreling Family. In a small village near Savatthi, a weary father brought his family to the Buddha. Their home had become a place of raised voices and cold silences. Each person felt unheard, carrying days of irritation like heavy pebbles in their pockets. The Buddha listened quietly, then reminded them that harmony begins with remembering one another's goodness, not faults. Something softened in the room, shoulders lowered, eyes lifted. The tension that had traveled with them began to thin. Maybe you know that feeling, walking back into a house after a long day, hoping for peace, but finding old frustrations recycled again and again. Kindness grows when we remember each other's good moments. It's hard to fight when the heart is softened. Tonight, think of one person you care about and recall a moment they made your life easier. Let that memory warm your breath. Story 22. The young monk who judged others too quickly. In the cool shade of the monastery courtyard, a young monk complained to the Buddha about another monk's habits. He felt irritated, believing he could see all of that man's flaws clearly. The Buddha reminded him that people often act from pains and histories we cannot see. The young monk paused, realizing he had judged a whole person through one narrow window. You might have felt that too, making quick assumptions about co-workers, partners, or strangers when you only know a few pieces of their story. We judge fastest when we're tired. Understanding grows when we slow down. Tonight, breathe slowly and say inwardly, I don't know everything about anyone. Let the openness settle. Story 23. The Buddha and the Anxious Newlywed. A young husband approached the Buddha with worry sitting heavily in his chest. He feared losing the love he had just found, checking constantly, seeking reassurance, gripping tightly. The Buddha spoke gently about how clinging squeezes the very thing we hope to protect. As the man listened, he felt his breath deepen, realizing that affection grows in openness, not in gripping. Maybe you've known that fear, wanting a relationship to feel secure, and accidentally bringing tension into it. Love breathes better in spacious hands. Clinging clouds the heart. Tonight, let your palms rest open and breathe into that gesture. An invitation to soften. Story 24. The Buddha guides a monk through envy. On a warm afternoon, a monk confessed that he felt jealous of another's skills and calm presence. Envy tightened his chest and soured his practice. The Buddha encouraged him to celebrate others' strengths as if they were his own, reminding him that joy shared only multiplies. The monk felt a small but real ease, the tightness loosening. Maybe you've compared yourself to someone at work or online, feeling smaller in their shadow. Another's light doesn't dim yours. Joy grows when we let it. Tonight, think of someone you envy and wish them well for just one breath. Feel the shift in your chest. Story 25. The Buddha and the Forgetful Monk. A monk ashamedly told the Buddha he kept forgetting simple instructions. His mind felt cluttered, half in the past, half in the future, never fully present. The Buddha spoke of training the mind gently, like calming a playful young animal, not with scolding, but steady patience. The monk exhaled, realizing he had been fighting himself instead of guiding himself. Maybe you've had days when your mind hops from task to task, forgetting what you walked into the room for. The mind learns through patience, not pressure. Gentle repetition builds clarity. Tonight, choose one simple thing to do: slowly drinking water, brushing your teeth, and let it be a moment of presence. Story 26. The Buddha and the Layperson Haunted by Regret. A lay follower arrived with regret hanging on him like a heavy cloak. He had said harsh words to a loved one and replayed the moment endlessly. The Buddha encouraged him to make amends and then release the self-punishment. Regret, the Buddha reminded, is like fire, useful when it cooks, harmful when it burns the house. You may know that feeling, wishing you could undo a moment, feeling it catch in your throat days later. Regret can guide, but it shouldn't imprison. Better to learn and move gently forward. Tonight, whisper inwardly, I can grow from this. Let the breath soften around it. Story 27. The Buddha helps a monk overcome laziness. In the early morning, a monk admitted he felt too sluggish to practice. He overslept, procrastinated, and felt trapped between guilt and fatigue. The Buddha advised him to alternate effort and rest, neither pushing too hard nor giving in completely. Hearing this, the monk finally felt permission to find a balanced rhythm instead of forcing himself. Maybe you felt this too, mentally drained, unable to start the task you know you should. Balance fuels energy better than guilt. A small step is still a step. Tonight, choose one tiny action you can take tomorrow morning. Simple, doable, kind to your energy. Story 28. The Buddha and the Merchant Attached to Wealth. A wealthy merchant visited the Buddha, troubled by the fear of losing what he had earned. Even with abundance, sleep came restlessly to him. The Buddha spoke about generosity not as loss, but as loosening the grip that tightens the heart. The merchant exhaled, realizing his fear came from clinging, not from the coins themselves. You may know that ache checking finances late at night, worrying about what could go wrong. Clinging creates fear. Sharing opens the heart. Tonight, think of one small act of generosity you can offer this week time. A kind word, a gentle gesture. Story 29. The Buddha and the Monks Afraid of Failure. A group of monks admitted to the Buddha that they avoided certain practices out of fear they might fail. The Buddha reminded them that avoiding effort is its own kind of suffering. Failure teaches more than hesitation ever will. Their faces softened. They felt freer, lighter, less tangled in the fear of looking foolish. Maybe you've held back from a project, a conversation, a dream, afraid of not being perfect the first time. Growth comes from trying, not perfection. Courage is the quiet beginning. Tonight, write down one thing you've been avoiding, followed by one tiny step toward it. Just one. Story 30. The Buddha and the Monk Troubled by Lust. One evening, a monk approached the Buddha embarrassed by persistent desire. He felt pulled by it, unsure how to meet the feeling without being overwhelmed. The Buddha didn't scold him. He spoke about seeing the human body clearly, its impermanence, its ordinary nature, not to create disgust, but to ease the gripping fantasy. The monk's breathing steadied, the intensity of the desire loosening. Maybe you know what it's like for the mind to fixate on a person, a craving, an impulse creating more tension than comfort. Desire grows when we romanticize it. Seeing clearly brings calm. Tonight, breathe into your belly and simply name any strong feeling. This is a feeling. Let it rise and fall without fighting it. Story 31. The lantern beside the river. The old potter walked each evening to the quiet riverbank, carrying a small clay lantern he had shaped long ago. Its light was soft, never bright, but steady in a way that felt like companionship. He sat where the reeds swayed gently, letting the sound of water loosen the knots inside his chest. Villagers often wondered why he came here after such long, tiring days. He never explained that the river was the only place where his thoughts slowed enough to breathe. Some evenings, he watched fallen leaves drift by, each one turning softly, never fighting the current. Other times, he simply held the warm lantern in his lap, feeling its weight remind him he was still here. One night, a young apprentice followed him, asking why he brought the lantern when the moon was full. The potter smiled without looking up. Because some lights aren't for seeing, he said. They're for remembering we don't have to hold everything alone. End quote. The apprentice stood quietly beside him, listening to the river learn its way through the dark. A breeze moved through the reeds like a gentle hand on a tired shoulder, and the potter breathed, feeling the lantern's warmth settle deeper into his palms. For the first time, the apprentice noticed how calm the river truly was. It had always been there, steady, unhurried, asking nothing in return. When they rose to leave, the lantern glowed the same way it always had, not bright, not demanding, just enough for the next small step. Story 32. The carpenter's quiet bench. A carpenter kept a weathered bench outside his workshop, where the morning sun arrived first. Before lifting a single tool, he sat there with his hands resting on his knees. He listened to the soft scratching of sparrows hopping in the dust. Neighbors thought the bench was just for resting between tasks, but the carpenter knew it was where he sorted the heaviness gathered from yesterday's unfinished work. The bench held more than wood. It held the quiet he couldn't always find inside the busy shop. One morning, a traveler asked why he sat on an empty bench instead of starting his day. The carpenter smiled softly. Because wood listens better when I'm calm, he said, and some knots untie themselves when you don't tug. In stirring time, the traveler sat beside him, noticing the way sunlight warmed the old planks. A gentle stillness hovered around them, like a hush after long conversation. The wind carried the scent of pine from the open workshop door. The carpenter breathed slowly, the way someone breathes after setting down a heavy box. When he finally rose, he touched the bench with a familiar hand. It was worn smooth from years of sitting through long mornings and longer thoughts. Its silence had shaped as many things as his tools, and the traveler realized the bench was not a pause, but part of the craft itself. Story 33. The gardener's evening path. Each evening, the gardener walked the narrow stone path behind her home. It wound between rows of herbs and soft blooming flowers. The air always carried the faint sweetness of time warming in the dusk. She didn't walk to inspect the plants. She walked to let the day fall off her shoulders a little at a time. The path curved like a gentle question, one she didn't need to answer. A neighbor once asked why she tended such a small garden with such care. She smiled, brushing soil from her palms. It gives me a place where things grow slowly, she said. Slow is how I remember myself. Well, some evenings she paused beside the rosemary, letting her fingertips drift through the leaves. Other nights, she sat on the low stone wall and watched fireflies blink awake. The quiet between their flashes felt like its own kind of breathing. When she reached the far end of the path, she always stopped to look back, not to check her work, but to see how the soft light settled into the world she had shaped. In that gentle dimness, nothing hurried. The garden grew the way she wished her thoughts would, unrushed, grounded, and quietly alive. Story 34. The Teacher and the Chalk Dust. After the school day ended, the teacher stayed a little longer in the empty classroom. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, turning chalk dust into drifting sparks. She watched them rise and fall as though the room itself exhaled. Her days were full papers, questions, conversations that stretched her thin. But here, in the quiet, she could finally hear her own footsteps again. The wooden desks sat like calm companions, waiting for tomorrow. She picked up a piece of chalk and traced a small circle on the board. No lesson, just a reminder of something simple and whole. A younger colleague peeked in and asked what she was drawing. The teacher shrugged gently. Just a pause, she said. Something round enough to rest inside. The colleague stepped closer. Noticing the softness in the room, the chalk circle glowed faintly in the golden light. For a moment, everything felt suspended, unfinished, yet peaceful. The teacher wiped her hands on her skirt, leaving pale smudges like passing clouds. She wasn't trying to teach anything. She was simply letting the day settle. And as she locked the door behind her, chalk dust still floated in the sun, quiet, drifting, unhurried, like small reminders that every day leaves room for gentleness. Story 35. The Fisherman's Low Tide Break. At low tide, the fisherman always took a short break beside the quiet harbor. He sat on a weathered crate, boots resting in the cool sand. The boats nudged softly against their ropes, murmuring like half-asleep animals. He spent long hours on the water, reading the sky for hints and changes. But here on the shore, he didn't read anything. He just watched the tide breathe. A young dockhand once asked why he paused when the water retreated. The fisherman tapped his chest lightly. "That's when the day leaves," he said. "And when I stop carrying its weight, I willed." The dockhand nodded, settling beside him. Salt wind brushed across their faces, gentle as an old friend's touch. A gull circled slowly overhead, its wings moving with steady intention. The world seemed to widen in that quiet moment. When the tide turned, the fisherman rose with calm familiarity. He knew the sea would always return at its own steady rhythm. There was nothing to rush, nothing to force. He stepped back toward his boat with slow, grounded steps, as if the ocean's calm had seeped into his bones, reminding him that even the tide rests. Story 36. The Wanderer Under the Oak Tree. A wandering monk paused beneath an enormous oak on the edge of a rural town. Its branches stretched wide, casting a cool shade across the grass. The air hummed softly with distant crickets. Villagers occasionally stopped by to ask him questions about life's tangles. He never gave direct answers. Instead, he listened until their voices softened. One afternoon, a weary shopkeeper slumped beside him. He spoke about long days, tight worries, and a mind that wouldn't quiet. The monk nodded gently. tracing a small circle in the dirt. "Watch the leaves," he whispered. The shopkeeper looked up. Sunlight flickered through the branches, dancing gently with the breeze. "They move without trying," the monk said. "Yet they remain part of the tree." "Amen." The shopkeeper breathed a little deeper. For a moment, something inside him loosened. The oak held both of them in its calm, generous shade. When the shopkeeper left, he walked a little slower, as if carrying less, as if the breeze had brushed some of the heaviness away. Story 37. The Seamstress and the Evening Quilt. In the soft glow of her small lamp, the seamstress worked on a quilt pieced from old, familiar fabrics. Each square held a memory-worn shirts, faded curtains, scraps from long-gone seasons. She stitched slowly, her breath steady and easy. Her days were often full of mending others' clothes. But this quilt was hers alone, a quiet place to tuck away the gentle moments she wanted to remember. The rhythm of thread pulling through cloth soothed her like a lullaby. A neighbor stopped by to return a repaired coat and paused at the doorway. "Doesn't all that sewing tire you?" he asked. She smiled, pressing a seam flat with her fingertips. "This part rests me," she answered. "It's where everything lines up just enough." "Well, bis Chris." The neighbor stood silently for a moment, watching the soft light spill across the quilt. A warm peace filled the room, deeper than the glow of the lamp. Outside, the evening settled against the window like a gentle blanket. She tied the final knot of the night, smoothing the patchwork with a tender hand. Not perfect, not finished, but quietly whole in its own way. Story 38. The Baker's Dawn Ritual. The baker arrived at the shop long before sunrise. The world was still blue and half asleep. He stood for a moment by the mixing table, breathing in the calm before the ovens warmed. He lifted a small bowl of flour and let a bit fall through his fingers. It drifted down like slow winter snow. For him, this was the quietest moment of the entire day. His apprentice once asked why he always paused before starting the dough. The baker smiled, brushing flour from his hands. "Because the morning listens," he said, "and I need a place to set my thoughts down." And, outside, the sky softened toward pink. Inside, the air filled with the gentle hush of rising bread. The baker moved slowly, as though the calm of dawn guided his hands. When the first loaves went into the oven, he watched the warm glow fill the room, noticing how each new day began with something simple: a breath, a pause, a soft handful of flour. Story 39. The Librarian's Quiet Ale. After closing hours, the librarian walked through a narrow aisle only she visited. It was lined with old, seldom opened books. The air there felt cooler, dustier, and strangely comforting. She trailed her fingers lightly along the spines. Each book held a silence different from the world outside. Here, nothing hurried. A co-worker once asked why she liked that forgotten aisle so much. She smiled faintly. "It's where the stories breathe slower," she said, "and where my own mind follows." Braided in the resin, she chose a random book and opened it to a worn page. The scent of paper rose like a soft memory. For a moment, she let the quiet wrap around her like a shawl. When she closed the book, she felt steadier, as though she had stepped out of time just long enough. She placed it gently back on the shelf. Then she walked toward the exit lights, carrying a calm that would last her the rest of the night. Story 40. The Old Man and the Porch Light. Every evening, An old man turned on the single porch light outside his cabin. It cast a warm, gentle circle across the wooden steps. He settled into his rocking chair, letting the night breeze cool his tired thoughts. He had lived many seasons here, storms, bright summers, and long winters. But these evenings were his favorite, when the world grew quiet enough to hear crickets waking. The chair rocked softly beneath him, steady and slow. A passing traveler once asked why he lit the porch when no one visited at night. The old man chuckled. "It's not for visitors," he said. "It's so the darkness feels like a friend, not a stranger." "Izzo," the traveler nodded, staying for a moment beneath the glow. The air settled around them in an easy hush. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called with measured calm. The old man breathed deeply. The kind of breath that comes after a long day's wait eases. He didn't seek anything from the night, only to sit inside its gentle circle of light. And as the traveler walked on, the porch kept glowing softly behind him, a small, steady kindness in the vast quiet. Story 41. The Mailman's Slow Corner. Each afternoon, the mailman stopped at the same quiet corner before finishing his route. It was shaded by an old sycamore whose branches stretched like gentle arms overhead. He rested his mailbag on the curb, letting his shoulders release for a moment. His days were filled with motion steps, doors, greetings, more steps. But at this corner, everything slowed, just enough for him to breathe fully. The wind carried a faint scent of fresh-cut grass from a nearby yard. A child once asked why he always paused there, even when he seemed busy. The mailman smiled, adjusting his cap, because even the road needs a break from being walked. He said, "And so do I." End quote. He watched leaves spin lazily to the ground, each falling in its own unhurried way. Cars hummed distantly, never disturbing the soft bubble of calm. He let the warmth of the sun settle along his back like a quiet hand. When he lifted his bag again, it felt a little lighter, not because the letters had changed, but because the pause had opened a bit more space inside him. Story 42. The Candlemaker's Evening Flame. The candlemaker ended each day by lighting a single small candle on her workbench. It burned low and steady, its flame swaying like a slow breath. Wax cooled in soft ripples around her tools. All day she shaped candles for others' birthdays, rituals, quiet homes. But this one was just for her. A bright whisper against the gathering dusk. The glow softened the room, turning shadows gentle. A customer once lingered after picking up an order. "Why do you light that one?" he asked. She smiled, her hands still dusted with fine white flakes. "It's how I put the day down," she said. "Just a little light to close the space between hours." Very full. The customer watched the flame dance, barely moving. The silence held a warmth deeper than the candle itself. Outside, the evening pressed softly against the windows. She leaned back on her stool, listening to the faint crackle of cooling wax. Not to think, only to rest in the small circle of light she had made. Story 43. The Farmer's Sunset Fence. After tending the fields from early morning, the farmer always paused at the western fence at sunset. He leaned his arms atop the worn wooden rail, letting his body settle into stillness. The sky unfolded in quiet layers of gold and rose. His work was long and unending soil, seed, weather, harvest. But this fence was his boundary between doing and simply being. Behind him, the land exhaled the heat of the day, A neighbor once pulled up in a dusty truck and asked why he stood there every evening. The farmer nodded toward the horizon. "It steadies me," he said softly. "The day ends without needing me to push it." Tannery. When not, they stood together as a breeze rolled through the tall grasses. The sound was soft, like a tide moving through the earth. Birds dipped low, circling toward their night nests. When the last line of light faded, the farmer touched the fence with a familiar hand. He carried the calm back home. Step by slow step, as night settled gently across the fields. Story 44. The cafe owner's last cup. After closing her small cafe each night, the owner brewed one final cup of tea. She sat at a corner table that overlooked the quiet street. Steam curled upward like a soft ribbon fading into the air. Her days were full of voices, clinking cups, and steady motion. But this last cup was silent, a simple moment that belonged only to her. The wooden chair creaked gently beneath her, a sound she found comforting. A regular customer once peeked in late and saw her sitting alone. "Isn't the day done?" he asked. She smiled and nodded. "This is how I feel the ending," she said. Outside, streetlights glowed like warm moons. Inside, the tea cooled slowly between her palms. She savored each sip until the warmth faded into her hands. When she stood, she switched off the lights one by one. The cafe darkened softly, as though the day itself had finally closed its eyes. Story 45. The musician's empty stage. After the audience left, the musician remained seated on the dim stage. He let the last notes still echo lightly inside him. The empty chairs stared back like quiet friends. He placed his instrument on his lap, feeling its familiar weight. Performances demanded energy, precision, presence, but this hush afterward was his favorite part. A stagehand, sweeping nearby, paused and asked, "Why stay so long?" The musician smiled. "To hear what's left," he said. "Music isn't only the sound, it's also the settling." Another, with it link, he closed his eyes, letting the soft hum of the theater fill him. The faint smell of wood polish drifted from the floorboards. High above, a single spotlight dimmed into a warm glow. When he finally stood, he bowed gently to the empty room. Not a performance, just gratitude for the quiet that held him after every long night. Story 46. The painter beside the open window. The painter set her brushes down each afternoon and opened the wide studio window. A breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of distant pines. She leaned her elbows on the sill, letting her breath fall into a slower rhythm. Her canvases were filled with color and motion, but her mind often buzzed with too many ideas, too many directions. The open window was her way of letting some of the buzzing go. A visiting friend asked why she always stepped away from her work at the same moment each day. The painter smiled. "So the painting can breathe," she said. "And so can I." Is mightn't tenses. Sunlight spread across the floor in long, soft lines. Dust motes drifted like gentle sparks. The world outside hummed with quiet afternoon warmth. When she returned to her brushes, her hands moved more softly. The window stayed open, a reminder of the calm waiting just beyond the frame. Story 47. The bus driver's last stop. At the end of his shift, the bus driver parked at the final stop and turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt like a blanket settling over him. He leaned back in the seat, letting the hum inside his mind quiet down. All day, He listened to conversations, questions, footsteps, traffic. But here, in the still bus, everything softened. The warm glow of the cabin lights soothed the edges of the long day. A mechanic walking by asked why he didn't head home right away. The driver chuckled. "I like to arrive slowly," he said. "Rushing out just brings the day with me." Face, he rested his hands on the wheel, feeling its cool, familiar touch. Outside, night deepened over the empty lot. A lone street lamp flickered gently, pulling a calm shadow across the windshield. When he finally stepped off, he felt lighter, as though the quiet had unknotted something inside him. Story 48. The Beekeeper at Dusk. The beekeeper closed the hives at dusk, watching the bees settle in their gentle clusters. The air buzzed softly, fading into a peaceful hum. He breathed in the warm scent of honey and wildflowers. His days were busy smoke, frames, careful hands, but dusk brought a softness he cherished. The bees quieting felt like a shared exhale. A curious neighbor once asked why he lingered long after the work was done. He smiled beneath his wide hat. "They teach me how to land," he said. "Even a full day ends gently." Instantaneous, the last light shimmered across the hive boxes, warm and gold. A breeze brushed his sleeves with tender ease. For a moment, he felt completely still. When he walked back toward the house, the hum of the bees remained behind him, soft, steady, peaceful in the fading light. Story 49. The Grandmother's Warm Kitchen. In the late evening, the grandmother sat at her kitchen table with a warm mug of cocoa. The house was quiet. The day's busyness finally settled. She watched the steam curl upward in slow spirals. Her life had been filled with noise, family, chores, stories, laughter. But these quiet evenings were her gentle return to herself. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background. A grandchild once wandered in and asked what she was thinking about. She smiled warmly. "Just listening to the day finishing," she said. "It has its own rhythm. Ike, you have. I cake. The child sat with her, letting the calm sink in. The kitchen's small lamp cast a soft circle of golden light. Outside, crickets sang with a slow, patient cadence. When the mug was empty, she held it a moment longer, not for the warmth, but for the peace it had carried. Story 50. The Traveler's Resting Stone. While hiking through rolling hills, a traveler found a smooth stone beside the trail. He sat down, letting his pack slide gently to the ground. The earth felt cool and grounding beneath him. He had walked far, chasing miles and scenery, but this simple rest was what he needed most. Birdsong drifted from the nearby trees, unhurried and clear. Another hiker passed and asked if he was all right. The traveler nodded with a soft smile. "Just letting my steps catch up," he said. "Sometimes the body arrives before the mind." He looked out across the open landscape. The hills rose and fell like slow breathing. A single cloud drifted overhead, quiet and full. When he stood again, the world seemed wider and kinder. He lifted his pack with ease, knowing the stone's calm would travel with him for a while. Story 51. The Librarian's Closing Light. Each evening, after the last visitor left, the librarian dimmed the lamps one by one. She moved slowly down the aisles, her steps soft against the carpet. The scent of old pages lingered in the quiet. All day she helped people find what they needed: answers, escapes, directions. But in this hush, she felt herself settle at last. The remaining lamp glowed like a small golden moon. A young man lingering by the door once asked why she stayed so long after hours. She lifted her eyes with a gentle smile. So the silence can finish its story, she said, and I can hear the last line. End quote. She rested her hand on the checkout counter, feeling the smooth, familiar wood. Shadows stretched softly across the shelves. Outside, the streetlights flickered on in slow succession. When she finally locked the door, the night felt peaceful enough to walk home without hurry. Story 52. The Carpenter's Clean Bench. The carpenter ended every day by brushing sawdust from his workbench. The motion was slow, almost meditative, like wiping the slate clean. Wood shavings curled in soft spirals along the floor. His hands were strong from shaping boards and beams. But evenings brought a gentler strength, quiet, steady, unforced. The scent of cedar lingered faintly in the cool air. A neighbor watching him once asked why he didn't just leave the mess for tomorrow. The carpenter chuckled, tapping the bench lightly. "This is how I unbuild the day," he said, "piece by piece, breath by breath." Oh wells. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface, feeling the grain beneath his touch. Sunset cast warm stripes across the workshop walls. Tools hung in perfect calm on their hooks. When he closed the door, the world outside felt lighter, as though the day's weight had stayed behind with the dust. Story 53. The post office clerk's quiet drawer. Every afternoon, the clerk took a moment before the final rush. She opened the small drawer beside her station and let her shoulders soften. Inside was a single peppermint wrapped in red and white stripes. Her days were full of questions, forms, stamps, and lines. But this tiny ritual grounded her. The peppermint symbolized a pause she rarely gave herself. A coworker once asked why she never ate it. She smiled and shook her head. "It's not for eating," she said softly. "It's my reminder that I can pause any time." End quote. She closed the drawer slowly, savoring the quiet. The hum of sorting machines softened for a moment, as though catching its breath. Sunlight slanted through the tall lobby windows, warm and steady. Then she returned to her counter, moving just a little slower and feeling a little more like herself. Story 54. The Gardener's Early Dawn Path. Before anyone else woke, the gardener walked the narrow path between flower beds. Morning dew sparkled like tiny lanterns on each leaf. The air was cool enough to make each breath feel new. Her days filled quickly with trimming, watering, lifting, hauling. But these first quiet minutes belonged only to her. She listened to the soft crunch of gravel under her boots. A neighbor once asked why she always started so early. She smiled, kneeling beside a blooming hydrangea. "If I begin with stillness," she said, "the rest of the day grows gentler." That spirit, all woe. Birds began their slow, sleepy songs overhead. Light stretched across the grass in pale gold strokes. The world seemed to unfold at her pace. She stood, brushing soil from her palms, ready to meet the day with a little more calm in her breath. Story 55. The cyclist's empty parking lot. After his evening ride, the cyclist circled the empty parking lot once more. The smooth pavement offered a final, easy glide. He coasted without pedaling, letting the air cool his warm skin. His roots were long and demanding, pushing his legs and lungs. But this slow loop was different, soft, reflective. The world held stillness he couldn't find during his ride. A friend watching from the curb asked why he didn't just stop. The cyclist grinned. "This is how I land," he said. "My wheels need their own way of slowing down." Quite, the fading light painted long shadows across the asphalt. His heartbeat softened into a steady rhythm. Crickets whispered from a nearby field. He finally rolled to a gentle stop, placing his foot down with quiet gratitude for the day's last breath of motion. Story 56. The florist's watered quiet. At closing time, the florist misted her remaining blooms one last time. Tiny droplets clung to petals like fresh morning tears. The shop held a sweet, earthy fragrance. Her days were alive with colors and constant arranging. But evening brought a hush that she treasured. The flowers seemed to relax with her as the day softened. A passerby once saw her through the window and asked why she stayed so late. She shrugged with a gentle smile. "It's easier to rest when the flowers rest too," she said. "They show me how to soften." Inside, she stood still, feeling the cool mist settle on her own hands. The lights dimmed into a soft glow. Outside, night pressed its quiet face against the glass. She locked up slowly, carrying the sweet calm of petals into the twilight. Story 57. The school janitor's last hallway. When the students were gone, the janitor walked the last hallway slowly. The echo of his steps felt peaceful instead of busy. Lockers lined up like silent old friends. His day had been full of noise, doors slamming, children's laughter, hurried footsteps. But in this emptiness, he felt a deep exhale rise from within. The scent of floor cleaner was mild and familiar. A teacher once paused at the doorway and asked why he lingered. He leaned on his mop with a soft grin. "It's the only time the building listens," he said. "And sometimes I need to be heard too." In Banix, he felt the cool tile beneath his shoes. A soft breeze drifted through an open window at the end of the hall. The world felt wide and slow for just a moment. Then he clicked off the lights, letting the hallway rest as gently as he hoped to rest himself. Story 58. The seamstress and the quiet thread. After a long day of sewing, the seamstress threaded one last needle, not to work, but to let her hands feel the familiar rhythm. The thread slipped through with a soft whisper. Her shoulders often ached from leaning over fabric and patterns, but this final moment slowed everything down. The room glowed with warm lamplight. A young apprentice once asked why she kept stitching after hours. She chuckled softly. "This one isn't for a garment," she said. "It's for my breath to follow." Dable. She made a few slow stitches into a scrap piece of linen. Each pull of the thread loosened something inside her. The quiet felt like a soft blanket settling over her lap. When she set the needle down, her hands felt lighter, and so did her heart. Story 59. The bookstore owner's wooden ladder. Each night, the bookstore owner climbed the tall wooden ladder one last time. She didn't need anything from the top shelf. She simply liked the view from above. Her day had been filled with questions, recommendations, and scanning books in and out. But from the ladder's top rung, the shop looked peaceful and still. Dusty light pooled around stacks like soft halos. A customer once asked why she climbed up there when she was tired. She rested her hand on a row of old hardcovers. "Up here," she said gently, "I can remember that everything doesn't need doing right away." The air felt warm and faintly woody. Stories waited quietly inside their covers. She breathed, slow and deep, letting the height soften her mind. When she climbed back down, She moved as though carrying a small piece of sky with her. Story 60. The mechanic's cooling engine. After finishing the last repair of the day, the mechanic stood beside the cooling engine. It ticked softly as it settled, releasing the heat of long effort. He wiped his hands on a clean rag, feeling the evening ease. His hours were filled with noise, tools clanking, engines revving, radios humming. But this cooling moment always brought him peace. The warm metal seemed to breathe out the day with him. A coworker once asked why he didn't head straight home. He smiled and leaned against the hood. "I like hearing the quiet part of the engine," he said. "It reminds me to cool down too." Actually, the garage lights dimmed into a soft amber. Outside, dusk spread across the lot like a slow wave. His breath steadied with the fading heat. When he finally switched off the last light, the calm stayed with him, steady as the engine's final sigh. 61. The old lantern maker. In a quiet mountain town, an old man spent his life crafting lanterns. Each lantern he made glowed softly, as if holding a piece of moonlight inside. Travelers often asked him how he achieved such warmth in his work. He only smiled and said, "I make them when my mind is clear." One winter, a young apprentice arrived, eager but restless. He wanted to create a lantern that would shine brighter than all others, but every attempt flickered and dimmed too quickly. The old man watched silently, letting the boy struggle. Finally, the apprentice snapped in frustration. "Why won't it work?" The lantern maker sat beside him and whispered, "Because your hands obey your mind. I was the machines of brushant. They worked together in stillness, breathing with the snow outside." The apprentice felt his thoughts settle, like flakes landing on calm ground. His next lantern glowed with soft gold, steady and serene. He stared at it with awe, no force, no pushing, no striving. The old man placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "What shines," he said, "is the peace you place inside." Whilst, and the apprentice learned that light cannot be made brighter by desire, only by quietness. 62. The bridge that listened. A wooden bridge stretched across a tranquil river. Villagers crossed it daily without noticing its gentle presence. But the bridge had one gift. It listened. When people were joyful, the planks hummed with warmth. When they were troubled, the wood felt heavier beneath their steps. A young woman often crossed, crying softly to herself. One evening, she paused at the center, unable to walk further. The water whispered below, reflecting a pale sky. The bridge sighed a long, creaking breath. Startled, the woman wiped her tears. The bridge spoke in its own way. A shift, a groan, a subtle vibration. She felt as if something beneath her was saying, "Release is now." She let her grief fall into the river like petals. The water carried it away without resistance. Her breath softened. Her shoulders loosened. When she walked again, the bridge felt lighter too. It had listened, and she had finally heard. 63. The bowl of snow. A monk once brought a bowl of fresh snow into the meditation hall. The students stared in confusion as he placed it in the center. "Observe," he said, and left without further explanation. The snow shimmered like crushed pearls in the morning sun. Some students debated its meaning: impermanence, purity, emptiness. Others ignored it entirely. One novice sat quietly, watching the slow melt. A single drop fell over the rim of the bowl. Then another. Hours passed, the snow shrinking without complaint. By evening, only water remained. Silent and clear, the monk returned and asked what they had learned. Many spoke of theories and metaphors. The novice simply said, "It changed without suffering." "Well," the monk bowed, "and so must we." "I free." The bowl glowed in the candlelight, holding its simple truth. 64. The Whispering Garden. A garden behind an old temple grew wild and free. Flowers bloomed without arrangement. Vines wandered as they pleased. Visitors often felt calmed the moment they entered its green embrace. One day, a stressed traveler asked the gardener how he kept it so peaceful. The gardener replied, "I do not tell anything where to grow." End quote. He knelt beside a crooked tree whose branches twisted playfully. Nature comforts us because it refuses to be anything but itself. Dime. The traveler sat among tall grasses and breathed deeply. He noticed each plant leaning softly into the wind. No striving, no competition, just life rising and falling gently. He felt his thoughts loosen, like knots untying. When he left, he carried a quiet insight. Maybe he too could grow without forcing direction, and maybe that was enough. 65. The Woman Who Stopped Running. A woman spent her life racing toward achievements. Her steps were sharp, her breath always short. When she reached one goal, she immediately chased another, but the emptiness inside only grew heavier. One evening, while walking home, she felt an unusual stillness. A park bench beneath a dim lamp seemed to invite her. She sat, exhausted, and listened to the quiet around her. Leaves rustled, a distant dog barked, the air cooled her skin. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. Her chest softened, her breath deepened. A strange relief washed over her. She whispered, "Maybe I don't have to earn rest." 8. The night answered with a gentle breeze. She stayed until her heart felt light again. And from that day, she walked more than she ran. She finally understood, peace doesn't chase us, we stop to meet it. 66. The Silent Bell. A temple bell hung high, but had not been rung for years. Visitors asked why, but the monks only smiled. One curious traveler climbed up to see it for himself. Dust covered the bronze surface like a soft blanket. He lightly tapped it with his knuckle. To his surprise, it produced a deep, rich hum, quiet but profound. He rushed to tell the monks. The elder monk nodded, saying, "Silence nourishes sound." Ringing. The traveler didn't understand. The monk guided him to sit before the bell. They stayed in complete stillness. Minutes passed. The air seemed to thicken with quiet. Then the monk gently struck the bell. A tone bloomed, long and resonant, filling every space. The traveler felt tears rise without reason. The monk whispered, "What you heard was the silence inside you." In something, and the traveler bowed deeply. 67. The leaf that took its time. A single leaf clung to a winter branch, while all others had fallen. Villagers joked that it was stubborn, but the leaf was simply waiting. One morning, a child asked the leaf why it held on. The wind rustled, carrying the leaf's silent answer, "I am not ready yet." In Darfazis, days passed. Snow gathered on roofs. Birds flew south. Still the leaf remained, golden and thin. Finally, on a calm dawn, it let go. It drifted down with slow, graceful spirals. No hurry, no fear, only surrender. The child watched with wide eyes. When it landed, the child whispered, "You fell beautifully." "If we do," the leaf glowed faintly, as if smiling. Some things, the child learned, bloom and fall on their own schedule. 68. The river's apology. A river once flooded a village after heavy rains. The villagers grew fearful and resentful. They built barriers and avoided its banks. One day, an elderly man approached the river alone. He sat for hours, watching the water rush and calm. Finally, he dipped his hands into the cool flow. "You frightened us," he murmured. The river gurgled, softened, then smoothed into quiet ripples. It felt almost like a bow. The old man smiled. "You were overwhelmed. So were we." "It's not," he returned to the village and said. "It wasn't anger, only overflow." Inquis. Slowly, people approached the river again. They learned to read its moods and give it space. The river never flooded violently again. Sometimes, understanding is all a river needs. 69. The candle that refused to compete. 2 candles were placed side by side in a shrine. One burned brightly, tall and straight. The other flickered weakly, melting faster. The weaker candle grew ashamed of its trembling flame. "Why can't I shine like you?" it asked. The bright candle did not answer, it simply burned. A monk entered, lighting incense with the trembling candle. Its tiny flame caught the incense perfectly. Moments later, the room filled with fragrant peace. The monk whispered, "Every flame has a purpose." Interest and common time. The weak candle felt warmth in its waxy heart. It didn't need to outshine anything. It only needed to give what it could. And it burned with gentle confidence until its final glow. 70. The sparrow and the quiet morning. A sparrow woke before sunrise every morning. She chirped loudly, eager to greet the world. But one dawn, she felt strangely quiet inside. Instead of singing, she perched and watched the sky change colors. Pink softened into gold, shadows slipped away. She listened to the subtle hush before the day fully began. For the first time, she noticed the world waking gently, the whisper of wind, the sigh of trees, the distant hum of life. The silence felt like a warm blanket around her tiny body. She breathed deeply, as if filling herself with dawn. Only when the sun rose fully did she finally sing, not loudly, but softly, like a blessing. Her song carried peace instead of excitement, and every creature who heard it felt calmer. From that day, she learned that even a sparrow needs quiet mornings. 71. The mountain that waited. A young hiker arrived at a towering mountain, eager to reach the summit. He rushed up the trail, determined to prove his strength. But halfway up, exhaustion forced him to stop. He sat on a rock, frustrated and ashamed. The mountain stood silently before him, unmoving and patient. A breeze brushed his face like a gentle reminder. He realized the mountain wasn't going anywhere. It didn't demand speed, skill, or perfection. It simply waited. So he slowed his breath and continued at a calmer pace. With each step, he felt less pressured and more present. Birds chirped, leaves rustled, the path seemed friendlier. Hours later, he reached the summit, not triumphant, but peaceful. He whispered, Thank you for waiting. Is Rava into howled? The mountain said nothing, but its silence felt like understanding. Some goals are reached not by pushing, but by walking with patience. 72. The teacup with a crack. An old teacup in a monastery kitchen had a small crack along its rim. The other cups teased it quietly when no one was around. Who will want you now? They whispered. The cracked cup never replied. One morning, a monk chose it over all the others. He poured hot tea slowly, watching steam rise. The apprentices were puzzled. Why use the broken one? They asked. The monk smiled and held it up. Because it teaches me gentleness. In Dala, he drank with care, feeling the warmth spread softly through him. The cracked cup seemed to glow with quiet dignity. Its flaw wasn't something to hide, it guided mindful action. When washed, the monk handled it like a fragile treasure. Every apprentice came to understand. Some imperfections make us kinder. 73. The cloud that refused to rain. A lone cloud drifted across a bright blue sky. It was heavy with water but afraid to release it. What if I disappear? It worried. A wise wind passed by and felt its trembling edges. Rain is your gift, the wind whispered. But then I'll be gone. The cloud replied. The wind swirled gently around it. You won't be gone. You'll change. If Fifely 9, the cloud held this thought like a soft seed. Finally, it opened itself and let the rain fall. The drops nourished fields, trees, and thirsty soil. Below, flowers lifted their faces in gratitude. The cloud grew lighter, then dissolved into open sky. But in the fields, green shoots glimmered its new form, and the cloud understood. Letting go is another way of becoming. 74. The monk and the empty scroll. A monk received a scroll said to contain ancient wisdom. He unrolled it eagerly, only to find it completely blank. Confused, he carried it to the temple master. The master read the empty page with great reverence. After a long pause, he smiled. This is the purest teaching of all. In Mindfulness, the monk frowned. But there are no words. There is space, the master replied. He guided the monk outside. They sat beneath a willow tree in silence. The wind rustled the leaves like soft whispers. Birds hopped through the grass. The monk felt his mind unclutter. The empty scroll, he realized, created room for everything. He bowed deeply to its blankness. Sometimes the clearest wisdom is written in silence. 75. The traveler who followed a lantern. A weary traveler wandered through a dense forest at night. Fog rolled across the path, making every sound echo strangely. Just when fear tightened his chest, a small lantern appeared ahead. It floated gently, as if waiting for him. He followed it through winding trails and dark trees. The lantern glowed with a soft, golden warmth. It never hurried, never dimmed. After a long walk, the forest cleared into moonlit grassland. The lantern stopped and hovered in place. The traveler whispered, "Where should I go now?" The lantern flickered once, then slowly faded away. He felt no fear, only trust. Looking around, he realized he could see the stars clearly. He no longer needed the lantern. His own calm would guide him the rest of the way. 76. The scribe who kept erasing. A scribe spent his days writing wise sayings on scrolls. Yet each time he finished one, he erased it completely. Other monks were baffled. "Why erase such careful work?" they asked. The scribe dipped his brush again, calm and steady. "Because attachment grows quickly," he replied. He wrote another line, beautiful, precise, then wiped it away. His heart felt lighter each time the ink vanished. One novice grew curious and sat beside him. "Doesn't it hurt to lose what you create?" The scribe smiled gently. "Not when you understand it was never truly yours." The novice watched the next stroke appear, then disappear. He felt something inside him soften. Releasing became easier with each erased line. 77. The lake and the falling stone. A child picked up a stone and tossed it into a still lake. Ripples expanded in soft circles, touching everything gently. "Did I disturb it?" the child asked. An old fisherman nearby shook his head. "You reminded it that life moves." Moving telf, they watched the ripples fade into quiet glass again. The lake returned to perfect stillness without effort. The child threw another stone, bigger this time. More ripples, more motion, more temporary change. Again, the lake calmed itself naturally. The fisherman said, "Troubles are stones." "Eve, what about the big ones?" the child asked. "They pass too." Its ability, the lake shimmered in the sunlight, peaceful and wise. The child felt comfort rise in his small heart. Nothing stayed troubled for long. 78. The lantern fox. In a misty valley. Legend spoke of a fox who carried a lantern. Travelers claimed it appeared only to the lost. One evening, a young man wandering in grief met the fox. Its lantern glowed like a tiny sun. The fox stared at him with calm, moonlit eyes. Without a sound, it turned and walked away. The young man followed through fields and whispering reeds. The fox paused at a hill overlooking his village. Then it gently set its lantern down. The young man understood he didn't need guidance anymore. The fox bowed, its fur shimmering like starlight. Then it vanished into the mist. The lantern remained, steady and bright. He took it home, not as a crutch, but as a reminder. Light follows those who learn to trust the path. 79. The bamboo that wouldn't break. A mighty storm swept across a valley. Trees shook violently, branches snapping in the wind. Yet a cluster of bamboo bent and swayed with stunning grace. A traveler sheltered nearby. Amazed. How does it survive? He wondered. When the storm passed, the bamboo stood tall again. The traveler approached an old monk who tended the grove. "Why doesn't it break?" The monk touched a bamboo stalk gently. "Because it bows." Well, he guided the traveler to press on it lightly. It bent willingly, then sprang back. "Strength isn't rigidity," the monk said. "It's the willingness to move with life." Well, the traveler carried this lesson long after the storm clouds drifted away. 80. The quiet sparrowhawk. A sparrowhawk perched high on a cedar tree. Other birds admired its sharp eyes and swift wings, but it rarely hunted. Instead, it spent long hours watching the sky. One young bird finally asked, "Why don't you chase more prey?" The sparrowhawk blinked slowly. "Because hunger passes, but clarity stays." Racing, it waited until the wind shifted just right. Only then did it glide effortlessly into the open air. Its flight was smooth, calm, unforced. It caught its meal with a single graceful motion. Returning to its branch, it whispered, "Act only when the mind is still." Is clammed. The young bird felt awe ripple through its feathers. Patience, it learned, was the deepest kind of power. 81. The river stone that warmed slowly. A smooth stone lay at the bottom of a cold river. For years it stayed tucked beneath rushing water, unseen and untouched. One day, a monk stepped into the river and picked it up. The stone felt icy in his palm. He carried it to the sunlit bank and placed it on warm sand. The stone didn't change right away. Minutes passed, then more. Slowly, warmth seeped in. Its chill faded without force. A novice watching said, "It finally became warm." "Oh," the monk replied. "Everything softens when the conditions are kind." Resent, the novice knelt beside the stone and felt the warmth rising. He realized that patience was not waiting, it was gentle allowing. Even old coldness loosens in time. The river's roar sounded softer in the distance, and the stone shone faintly in the afternoon light. 82. The orchard of second chances. A farmer tended an orchard that had seen better seasons. Some trees bore fruit, others stood bare and brittle. He walked among them at dawn, feeling discouraged. "Why keep caring for the ones that don't give?" he whispered. An elderly neighbor approached, leaning on a cane. "Trees grow on their own time," she said softly. He sighed. "But I'm tired of waiting." "Isn't unfairst." She guided him to a tree he'd nearly given up on. A single blossom trembled on a thin branch. The farmer stared in disbelief. The neighbor smiled. "Not everything blooms when you want it to." "I can't." He touched the small blossom gently. Something eased in his chest. He understood the orchard wasn't failing, it was unfolding, and every tree deserved one more dawn. 83. The painter who saved one brushstroke. A village painter created bright landscapes that everyone admired, but he felt secretly empty, pressured to impress. One evening, he painted a quiet mountain scene. It felt honest, simple, true. As he admired it, fear arose. What if no one likes this? He nearly painted over it. Instead, he left a single brushstroke untouched. Just one. He circled it every day, painting around it, never covering it. That lone brushstroke reminded him of who he really was. The villagers noticed something different in his new work: calm, warmth, sincerity. But they didn't know the reason. Only he knew. One honest brushstroke saved him from losing himself. And it taught him, not every part of you is meant for approval. 84. The guest who brought too much. A traveler arrived at a remote inn, carrying an enormous pack. He walked bent over, struggling under its weight. The innkeeper watched with kind eyes. "Long road?" she asked. "Too long." He sighed. She guided him to a chair and offered warm tea. He refused to remove the pack. "It has everything I might need." "Liver and quod." The innkeeper nodded gently. "May I look inside?" He hesitated, then agreed. She opened it and found items he'd never used: spare tools, old maps, broken trinkets. The traveler stared, embarrassed. "These things have slowed you more than the road," she said. He removed half the contents, then more. When he stood, he felt strangely light. Sometimes we carry weight simply because we're afraid to let it go. 85. The Willow Bridge. A wooden bridge stretched across a quiet marsh. Supported by willow trees, travelers often rushed across it without noticing its gentle sway. One morning, a young woman stopped at its center. She felt the boards shift beneath her feet. I don't feel safe, she whispered. An old ferryman sitting nearby called out. The bridge moves because it listens to the wind. I want to lower. She clung to the railing anxiously. He approached slowly. Let the sway guide you, he said. She loosened her grip. The movement felt less threatening, almost rhythmic. With each breath, she softened. Crossing the bridge became easier. On the other side, she looked back with gratitude. What once felt unstable now seemed alive. Balance, she realized, is not the lack of movement, it's learning to move with what is. 86. The candlemaker's pause. A candlemaker worked late into the night, pouring wax and trimming wicks. Orders piled high, and he felt pressured to keep going. His hands trembled with fatigue. A single candle on his table burned steadily. Watching its flame, he whispered, I can't keep up. Dunevery. Just then, the flame flickered low, nearly going out, but it steadied again in a softer glow. The candle didn't force its light, it simply rested in each moment. The candlemaker closed his eyes. He took a slow breath, then another. He blew out the flame gently, thanking it. The workshop fell quiet. He realized even light needs pauses. He stacked his tools and finally went home. Rest, he understood, was what kept his craft alive. 87. The sparrow that returned. A tiny sparrow built a nest outside a carpenter's workshop. One stormy night, the wind tore the nest apart. In the morning, the carpenter found the sparrow hopping anxiously among the broken twigs. Poor thing, he murmured. He watched as the sparrow carried one twig, then another. It rebuilt carefully, patiently. No anger, no despair, just steady effort. By sunset, the nest stood whole again. The carpenter felt a tug in his chest. He'd been delaying repairs on his own home out of frustration. Seeing the sparrow at work softened him. He fetched his tools and began his repairs with quiet resolve. The sparrow chirped approvingly from its fresh nest. Sometimes small creatures teach us how to start again. 88. The hermit's footprints. A hermit lived in a forest hut. Far from the village, people rarely saw him. But they noticed footprints leading to a creek at dawn. A curious villager decided to follow one morning. He found the hermit sitting beside still water. The hermit smiled without surprise. You came to learn something? The villager nodded. I want peace, he admitted. The hermit placed a foot gently in the water. Ripples spread outward, then softened. This is the mind, the hermit said. Things disturb it, but it returns to calm when left alone. Wake. They sat quietly until the water stilled again. The villager felt something settle in his chest. Walking back, he realized peace wasn't hidden in the forest. It was waiting inside him to stop stirring. 89. The library of unread books. A wise woman kept a library full of books she never finished. Visitors teased her about it. Why keep what you don't read? They asked. She smiled softly. Each book reminds me that knowledge has no deadline. One evening, a young scholar visited, feeling overwhelmed. I can't keep up, he confessed. She guided him to the shelves. Pick any book, she offered. He chose one at random and opened the first page. She closed it gently. You don't need to know everything, she said. You just need one clear step at a time. Tense time, the scholar exhaled, tension slipping from his shoulders. She returned the book to its place. Some wisdom is simply knowing you have time. 90. The dew collector. At dawn, a villager walked through fields with a small bowl. He gathered dew from tall grasses, drop by drop. Others laughed at him for his strange habit. Why such tiny bits of water? They mocked. He continued quietly each morning. Over time, he filled jars with the collected dew. A traveler saw the jars glistening in sunlight. "How did you gather so much?" he asked. "One drop at a time," the villager said, "and I never rushed." Nose a time. The traveler felt humbled. He'd been trying to fix his life in one sweeping effort. The villager smiled kindly. Even the smallest consistency becomes abundance. End quote. The fields glowed with morning light, and the traveler walked away, inspired to start small. 91. The potter's quiet wheel. A potter worked late in her small shed, shaping clay into bowls. Her wheel spun smoothly, but her mind raced with worry about bills and deadlines. Her hands trembled, and the bowl began to wobble. Frustration tightened her breath. She stopped the wheel and stared at the crooked shape. The shed was silent, except for crickets outside. She placed her palms on the clay gently. "Let's start again," she whispered. She spun the wheel slower this time. Her breathing softened to match its rhythm. The clay responded to her calm touch, rising evenly, line by line. The bowl formed with graceful curves. When it was done, it looked simple and true. She smiled at its quiet beauty. The potter understood. The wheel follows the hands, and the hands follow the heart. 92. The compass that didn't point north. A sailor found an old compass in a flea market. He tested it and discovered it didn't point north. It pointed slightly east. Frustrated, he nearly threw it away. An elderly vendor stopped him. "It's not broken," she said. "It points where it's been taught to trust." You can't. Idea. Everyone. The sailor frowned. Confused, the vendor placed it in his palm. Sometimes a direction isn't wrong, it's personal. I was ever. He carried the compass on his next journey. Storms came. Winds shifted. Whenever he felt lost, he held the compass. It pointed steadily, waiting for him to breathe. He realized it didn't tell him where to go. It told him to slow down and choose. By the end of the voyage, he felt grateful for its imperfect guidance. Not all paths require north. 93. The maple leaf that refused to fall. High on a maple tree, one leaf clung tightly as autumn winds swept around it. All its companions had already let go. Not yet, it whispered to itself. A sparrow perched nearby, watching. "Why hold on so hard?" the bird asked gently. "I'm afraid of what comes after," the leaf answered. The sparrow tilted its head. "Falling isn't the end. You'll nourish the earth." Down, the leaf trembled in the breeze. It had never thought of falling as giving. Another gust came strong. Cool. Honest. The leaf loosened, then released. It drifted in a soft spiral toward the ground, landing on warm soil. It felt strangely peaceful. The sparrow chirped softly, and the tree stood silent and wise above them both. 94. The bell tower at dawn. A village bell tower stood tall. Its bell rarely rung. Each morning, a caretaker climbed the stairs to check it. He climbed out of habit, not purpose. One dawn, he found a young boy waiting at the base. "Why climb every day if the bell never rings?" the boy asked. The caretaker smiled. to remind myself to show up. Odie. They climbed the tower together. At the top, soft pink light touched the rooftops. The boy gazed at the view in awe. "It's beautiful up here," he whispered. "That's why I come," the caretaker said. "Not for the bell, but for the sky." "In now," the boy nodded quietly. "Routines," he realized, sometimes keep us steady when nothing else does. The bell remained silent, but the moment rang true. 95. The lantern that burned too bright. A lantern maker crafted one lantern brighter than all the rest. Customers admired it, calling it extraordinary, proud yet uneasy. He kept it for himself. Each night, he watched its flame blaze intensely. But one evening, the wick burned down too fast. The flame sputtered, then went out. The lantern maker stared at the sudden darkness. He realized it had used all its fuel too quickly. The next day, he trimmed the wick differently. He lit it again, this time softer, steadier. The lantern glowed warmly without strain. Its light lasted long into the night. The lantern maker exhaled, feeling relief. Brightness wasn't the goal. Endurance was. And he learned to keep his own flame gentle too. 96. The fisherman's empty day. A fisherman spent an entire day catching nothing. Wave after wave rolled in without offering a single fish. By sunset, his shoulders sagged. He felt like he'd wasted precious hours. As he rowed back, he noticed the sky turning gold. Birds swooped low, singing above the quiet water. He paused and set his oars down. The lake glowed like melted copper. He realized he hadn't looked up once all day. He'd missed the beauty around him while chasing results. A breeze brushed his cheek, cool and forgiving. He smiled softly, letting the moment wash through him. The empty catch didn't feel like failure anymore. Some days offer peace instead of progress. He rowed home slower, grateful for what he'd almost missed. 97. The snowflake that landed last. During a gentle snowfall, children watched flakes drift from the sky. Most melted on contact with the warm ground. But one tiny flake floated slowly, taking its time. A little girl lifted her mitten to catch it. The flake landed softly, sparkling in her palm. Her friends ran ahead, laughing. She stayed still, admiring the delicate crystal. "Why did you fall so late?" she whispered. The snowflake didn't answer, but in the silence, she felt something settle inside her. Everything has its own rhythm. The flake melted into a single drop of water. The girl smiled and finally ran to join the others. Some moments come when they're meant to, not early, not late, but exactly right. 98. The old gate that never closed. At the edge of a village stood an ancient wooden gate. Its hinges were rusted, and it never fully closed. Travelers wondered why no one fixed it. A villager explained, "It's been open longer than anyone remembers." One stormy night, a man sought shelter there. The wind howled through the loose boards. He sat beneath the gate, shivering and discouraged. When the rain softened, he noticed the gate still standing, open to the world. It had weathered countless nights like this. He touched the wood, feeling its stubborn strength. The gate had never tried to be perfect, only to stay open. The man felt something in his chest loosen. He walked back through the village with quieter steps. Not everything needs fixing. Some things just need welcoming. 99. The kite in the strong wind. A child released a bright red kite into a windy sky. The kite tugged hard, almost pulling the string from his hands. He grew frightened and held tighter. The kite climbed higher, dancing wildly. An older neighbor approached. Noticing his struggle, "Loosen your grip," she advised gently. He hesitated, but relaxed his fingers slightly. The kite steadied instantly, floating smoother and freer. The child stared in amazement. "It flies better when I don't hold so tight." "And," the neighbor nodded. "Some things rise when we trust them." At ease, he let the string run a little more. The kite soared beautifully against the blue sky. His fear turned to joy. A gentle hold can lift more than a tight one. 100. The fire that chose to glow on a winter night. Villagers gathered around a fire in the square. Some wanted it hotter, others wanted it larger. They fed it too much wood too quickly. The flames roared, then collapsed into smoke. An elderly woman stepped forward. "Let it breathe," she whispered. She rearranged the logs calmly and waited. A small flame flickered, hesitant but alive. Slowly it grew into a warm, steady fire. People drew closer, feeling comfort on their faces. The woman smiled softly. "Fire isn't forced, it's tended." "Well, I tend." The villagers nodded in quiet understanding. They sat together, warmed by the gentle glow. Strength, they realized, didn't need to shout. Sometimes it's the softest warmth that lasts through the night. "It's all right now. You've traveled far tonight." Across quiet stories, gentle teachings, soft footsteps through stillness. And as we come to the end of this hour together, feel how different the air is around you, how the world seems to breathe a little slower, how your body rests a little deeper against the bed. Nothing to solve, nothing to manage, not anymore. Just this moment, like the hush that settles over a calm lake after the last ripple fades. The kind of stillness you don't need to earn. The kind that arrives when you finally let yourself stop carrying so much. All evening, you've been walking beside rivers and moonlit paths, listening to voices that remind you of something you've always known deep down, that the mind grows quiet when you stop pushing it, that peace comes when you give it room to land. Maybe you can feel a little of that now, like a candle burning low. Steady, the flame barely moving, the warmth softening the darkness around it. Your breath is the same, gentle, warm, familiar, in and out. Nothing dramatic, just the natural rhythm of being alive. You don't have to hold the day anymore. Let it slide off your shoulders as if it were simply too heavy to carry into the night. The world can wait, and it will. Notice how the body loosens even without trying. The jaw softens, the belly loosens. The hands uncoil their quiet grip on worries you never needed to keep. Let your whole being drift like a small boat released from the dock. The rope slipped free, the water holding you without asking anything in return. The stories tonight weren't meant to instruct you, only to accompany you. To keep you company in that very human space where you're tired, where the mind loops back on itself, where the heart holds more than it ever says out loud. But now, in the gentle dark, all of that begins to dissolve, as if the moonlight itself were smoothing the edges of every thought, every memory, every little weight you've been balancing. Feel how the breath becomes quieter, how the chest rises and falls like a slow tide, how each exhale empties you a little more, making space, creating room, inviting rest. If a thought tries to follow you into this softness, let it float like a leaf carried downstream. No need to chase it, no need to push it away. Just let the river of your breath carry it where it wants to go. You're safe here, fully safe, held in a silence that asks nothing, expects nothing, demands nothing. Maybe you can sense the night outside your window, the quiet houses, the sleeping streets, the wide, open sky stretching across everything. The same sky the Buddha once looked upon, the same sky that has watched over countless restless hearts, the same sky that now watches over you. The world is so spacious, and you, too, are spacious inside, big enough to hold whatever comes, gentle enough to let it go when it's time. Feel the warmth gathering at the center of your chest, not bright, just a soft glow, like embers in a fire that's almost out. No effort, just presence. Let that warmth spread slowly, shoulders, arms, down the spine, through the hips, legs, all the way to the soles of your feet. A quiet wave of loosening, a quiet wave of belonging. Tonight, nothing is wrong with you. Nothing needs to be fixed. You are simply tired and allowed to rest. Let the breath grow shallow now, the way it does when sleep begins to approach, as if the body is dimming the lights one by one, preparing to drift, unbothered, into the deep. You might sense the ocean now wide and dark and calm somewhere just beyond the edges of perception. Its rhythm echoes your own, slow, steady, eternal. Let yourself lean into that rhythm. Let it rock you. Let it carry you past all remembering, all planning, all thinking, into the quiet place beneath it all, the place that has always been untouched. There is nothing you must hold up, nothing you must perform. You are free to let the day disappear behind you, like a distant shoreline fading into the night. Let your breath soften so much that you barely feel it. Let your thoughts blur at the edges, drifting, drifting, until they become nothing more than faint shapes moving through mist. This is the stillness you've been moving toward. Not a lesson, not an idea, just the felt sense of being gently, quietly alive. Stay here, float here, rest here. And if sleep comes, let it. You don't have to follow the words anymore. You don't have to stay awake for anything. You can drift exactly where your body wants to go. This moment, right now, is enough. You are enough. Let the night carry you. Let the silence surround you. Let the breath be your only companion, soft and slow, like a final whisper across calm water. And now, as the last traces of wakefulness loosen their hold, fall gently, fall easily, into the quiet, into the warmth, into the stillness that has been waiting for you all along. Good night, and rest well.